has something to share in either wisdom, story, or logic. And it's clearly amazing to hear all the different missing links discovered by people unique to their own journeys and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hale on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and store of others. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody here back to the Missing Link. Today we are excited and honored to have a neurosurgeon, someone who is just educating people, helping people all around the world. Dr. Jack Kruse, how are you today, brother?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing amazing, considering all the insanity we got going on. But why don't we start off with telling us about yourself, maybe what part of the world you're in, a little bit about your background, education, anything that you'd like to, for people to get to know you a little bit better if they're hearing you here for the first time.
Yeah, I'm a board-certified neurosurgeon in the United States. Currently, right now, I'm at the 13th latitude inside the tropics. I trained allopathic medicine for over 30 years and became disillusioned with centralized medicine probably when I was 40 years old. So it's going on probably almost 20 years now. And I realized that decentralized medicine, what does that mean? That there's no central controller, meaning there's no big pharma, no hospital CEO. You need to subtract those things out. And it turns out most of the prescriptions that help people do well are actually fundamentally based in nature. So what does nature do to optimize our biology in a decentralized fashion? Well, the classic way most people know about is through circadian biology. That's the light and dark cycle. Those are the two negative and positive feedback loops. But ultimately, it always comes back to three key thermodynamic features: light, water, and magnetism. And I call those the three-legged stool. And it's the three-legged stool for biology. It's in fact what SETI uses to look for extraterrestrial life on other planets. So I like to give people the idea between Earth and its nearest planet, which is Mars. Both planets have light. Both planets have water. But turns out Mars has next to nothing in terms of a magnetic field. So it's a dead red desert. So it gives you the idea that just because those three things can be present, in a local environment, doesn't mean they're optimized for health, which is part of the reason why I think it's kind of crazy that Elon Musk wants to take us to, Mars, when it's clearly not suited for our biology. It's one thing about being a frontiersman, but if you're taken from, people like Vasco da Gama or Magellan, to their death, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you understand this. But it's important for people diseases or chronic diseases of aging to understand that instead of opting for a prescription pad, they can opt for the natural things that are found in nature that are specifically linked, to light, water, and magnetism. So, there's always a lot of smart alecks and a lot of podcasts I do. They'll say, well, tobacco is natural and it's not optimized for our biology. That's true. But you'll also find out there's aspects of tobacco that actually are beneficial, as long as they're not abused or they don't, affect your physiology and they're used properly. The key is understanding what is the right amount to optimize for light, water, and magnetism in the zip code that you choose to be in. And it gets so interesting when you understand this. You could live in the same house or have an identical twin who lives in the same house. And just being in a different bedroom, that's a different zip code that your mitochondria has to operate in. And that small little change, those little quantum nano machines inside your mitochondria called cytochrome proteins respond to those small little changes. And that is the level that a decentralized MD has to get patients to understand how to step back from the big pharma, centralized medicine, platform, because what centralized medicine is good at, let's start with the good at. We're good at taking care of trauma. We're good at taking care of broken legs, broken arms. That we've mastered, and we do pretty well with that. Let's talk about what we're bad at. We're really bad at chronic disease management. It turns out chronic disease management makes up about 98% of the problems that are present globally, not just in the United States, but everywhere. And no one has an answer for these problems. We know about the obesity epidemic. We know about the opioid epidemic. We know about the diabetes epidemic that's present, not just in the United States, but globally now. But no one's actually fundamentally got down to the core issue. Why are we treating the symptoms, and why are we not trying to reverse these diseases? And that's fundamentally the reason why about 20 years ago I became what I would say is a decentralized doc. I started to look under rocks that I wasn't taught about in medical school, that I wasn't taught about in residency, even to fix some of my own problems. And I began to realize how those things not only could help me, but then they started helping my family and they started helping my patients. And then I just started putting my ideas on the internet, on my website, on social media platforms, and talking about it. I've done thousands of podcasts now, about this topic, because I think people are interested in it. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there in medicine, whether it be allopathic medicine, functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, or even say Chinese medicine, or what I would say Eastern or Western medicine, or even energy medicine. And ultimately, there's always partial truths in all of those branches of medicine I just mentioned. But the key is, anytime you have a half truth, it always leads to a full lie in terms of a reversal. You need to understand fundamentally how the thermodynamic system that you're in right now can lead to the problem you got, and then you come up with a plan to reverse engineer it, without having to rely on big pharma's prescription pad to do it.
So if we're being, kind of attacked by our food, the genetically modified, the pesticides, we're being attacked by the, the water, by the, fluoride and, all the other stuff they put in, and we're being attacked by the air, by the stuff they're spraying, and then the frequencies that they're being attacked. How do we, stay healthy when it seems like we're being bombarded in so many different areas?
Well, that's the key. You have to find out what is the modus operandi that's actually the problem. See, this is my big issue with the functional medicine practitioners. They've got everybody believing what you just said. These are all huge problems. I got some news for you. Those are not all huge problems for some people. Some people are able to adapt to those things, no problem. And you have to realize, what is evolution about? It's about adaptation of the species. Now, there are some people that do have a problem with those things. But you have to ask those practitioners, what is the difference between, say, Jesse and Jack? Why can Jack do some things that Jesse can't? And that fundamentally, that comes down to actually a thermodynamic answer of the difference between our mitochondria, like what our haplotype is, what our uncoupling rate is, what latitude Jesse lives at. And, like, for example, anybody who thinks that genetically modified food is a problem for everybody at every latitude, they don't understand food. Food is an electromagnetic barcode of photosynthesis. So genetically modified food is an electromagnetic code of food made in the lab, meaning it doesn't have the same frequency. Now, you won't die, meaning short term, from, say, calorie deprivation by eating genetically modified food. Then your question's got to be, who's got a bigger problem with GMO food? Is it the uncoupled haplotype, or is it the coupled haplotype? And for those of your listeners who don't know what that means, know that there's two genomes in the body. The genome that centralized medicine has really tried to ram down our throats, especially what we just went through with COVID for the last 2.5 years, is the RNA and DNA story. That's the one that I want you to forget about, because it's not nearly the most important one. The most important one is the mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is the only thing that creates energy in your body. And if you know anything about physics, just the basics, energy is the base of anything. So, for example, when we have a cadaver, what is a cadaver? It's a body of atoms that has no animation in it, meaning energy is not flowing through that system. So we call it a cadaver. You and I right now are talking over the internet. We're the same conglomeration, the atoms that's in someone who's dead, but the difference is there's flow through our mitochondria. There's electromagnetic pulsing going through us that allows us to communicate. So you need to realize, what are the engines? What are the mitochondria? What are the differences in humans? Humans evolved around the East African Rift about 2 to 4 million years ago, depending on whose papers you believe in the literature. But I think most people will agree that time frame is reasonable. Well, in the East African Rift, that's in a tropical area, kind of where I am right now. Almost all the humans who came from chimpanzees, we call them silly talking monkeys. My tribe calls them. We're the latest iteration in that crew. We were coupled haplotypes, meaning that we were tightly coupled. Every single bit of food that we ate that we broke down to electrons and protons was transmitted to energy. We did not need to create a lot of thermal heat. Why? Because the environment inside the tropics is good. So what eventually happened to us compared to our nearest people? Well, we stopped climbing trees. We were isolated by oceans. We started to eat more seafood than our family. We lost our hair. The sun became much more important. And the biggest change in us is that we developed these frontal lobes in our head. And frontal lobe development was thermodynamically possible through all these changes. Then what happened 70,000 years ago? The silly talking monkeys began to migrate out of the East African Rift and then radiated all over the planet. And it turns out, as they radiated, their mitochondrial engines then changed. And they changed for one specific reason. It goes back to what I said to you earlier. Light, water, magnetism. Because when you move out different latitudes, the sun changes. When you move out during a different latitude, you're going to face a different magnetic field. Just like I tried to explain to you before about the issues with an identical twin in a house. That one bedroom is different than another. It's the same thing with a different latitude or a different neighborhood. And that changes the free radical signaling in the mitochondria. But the big change, most people know, is you go further north, it gets colder. So why did we innovate an uncoupled haplotype? And in fact, most of the world today is Northern European. We had to liberate more free heat. So that means the amount of food that we ate, instead of all going to energy, and we use some of it to dissipate into heat so that we could live at the 40th latitude, the 45th latitude, the 60th latitude. What are some of the other things that happened? Most people know the story of Neanderthals. Neanderthals died out, probably 20,000 years ago when we hit Northern Europe. Many people wonder why. Well, it's pretty simple. They had bigger brains than we did. They had a bigger skull case. They had 125 grams more brain. What did that do? When they got to a certain point, they could not handle those environments. So what eventually happened? Natural selection took them out, and the smaller brain size Homo sapien incorporated the Neanderthals into them. Why? Because they were better adapted for the environment that they radiated out of. So today, now we're in 2022, we now have the majority of population on this planet, 8 billion people. Most of them have uncoupled haplotypes. Not many have coupled haplotypes, which is a very ironic twist of human evolution. Why? Because we first came from a coupled haplotype. So the reason I'm going on with this explanation for you is I want you to understand, because I know it sounds controversial, that a guy like me could tell you that GMO food or things like that may not be as big a problem for certain people, because you have to understand the thermodynamics of what it means. Now, generally, as a stereotype, I will tell you, I'm in complete agreement with you, Jesse, that if you can avoid GMO food, you want to do it because it's man-made and it doesn't have the proper electromagnetic barcode of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is created as the Earth goes around the planet. Most people know that pineapples and coconuts don't grow in the tundra. So you have no business eating, a pineapple or coconut if you live, at the 30 or 35th latitude. But guess what? We all know that we can go into Whole Foods and do it. So I would tell you that even if that is an organic pineapple, an organic coconut, you're still making a big mistake by eating it if you're mismatching the environment, especially if you have an uncoupled haplotype. So when you get to this level of ideation, you can see how a guy like me would be very controversial in different podcasts, because I will controvert nonsense when people bring it. I will tell you that's not always true. You have to always go back and understand the physics of organisms. If you don't understand the physics of organisms, in my opinion, you don't understand anything about human biology.
How does your blood type, factor into what type of foods you should be eating?
It's not as big a deal as you think. What blood type actually is really tied to actually has to do with the oxygen content of the environment you're in. So think about oxygen. What do you know about oxygen, Jesse? Oxygen is the only paramagnetic gas on the periodic table. What does that mean? It's actually drawn to magnetic fields. Well, what does the fifth cytochrome in your mitochondria do? It has an FO head that spins. And anything that spins through Faraday's laws generates what? A magnetic field. So guess what? It turns out that the ABO groups have different magnetic flux to marry up to the fifth cytochrome. There's the difference. So ABO stuff is actually more tied to the environment than it is to food. But I love people who try to tell you otherwise, because that's how you refute bullshit.
Now, what about hydrogen? If you're, have like a hydrogen machine, brown gas machine, where you're actually either drinking hydrogenated water or even breathing that brown gas in, does that help the body?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is another huge misconception. So you have to take people back to the periodic table. Understand that hydrogen has three isotopes. It's light hydrogen, which is protium. Then you have deuterium, which is heavier hydrogen. It's a proton and a neutron together. And then the third thing is you have tritium. Tritium is the radioactive version of hydrogen. Biology doesn't use tritium at all. It uses deuterium, it uses protium. But anybody who's opened up a biochemistry book has known when they go through a glycolytic pathway, we have all these enzymatic steps and all these crazy things, including glycolysis and the TCA cycle. Very few people, especially in allopathic medicine or functional medicine, have ever asked the question, why does nature do that? I'm going to answer the question for you, Jesse, very quickly. Nature is racist. Nature does not like heavy hydrogen. In fact, what mitochondria functionally do is they create water. And it turns out the water that we create in mitochondria is deuterium depleted. And it turns out all those crazy steps are to get only light hydrogen into the molecules that create CO2 and water. CO2 has no hydrogen, but that's the other exhaust fuel. Why is this important for your listeners to understand? Because everybody learned in third grade photosynthesis, CO2 plus water and sunlight equals sugar. Everybody knows that. It's no problem. You know what most people forgot? The mitochondria reverse that process. It takes sugar and turns it into CO2 and water. But the difference is we can create foods with any kind of water. It turns out in the hydrology cycle out of the ocean that I'm looking at right now, it's 150 parts per million of deuterium. But it turns out the mitochondrial water that's made in you is 0 to probably 10 parts per million. So you got to ask yourself the question then, if you're a curious person, why is it that mitochondria are doing that? And then it scales back to something that we started this podcast with earlier. It goes back to E equals MC squared. We're back to thermodynamics. Why? What did Einstein's equation tell us about atomic mass? It says that mass and energy equal, right? E equals MC squared. So anything that has more mass in it is less thermodynamically efficient. Anything that has less mass in it is much more thermodynamically efficient. Turns out mitochondria are hydrogen fuel motors, and they like only protium, which is the light version of hydrogen. Here's where it gets even more interesting, Jesse. Plants also tend to like light hydrogen. So we have chloroplast and mitochondria, the two things that everything's linked to, like light hydrogen. So you have to ask yourself a question. Is this the reason why Jack really doesn't like GMO foods? Is it because the guys that make it in a lab have no controls, QA controls on the amount of hydrogen put in there? Is this the reason why Jack is not going to get stamp of approval to anybody's, hydrogen gas machine? Yeah, because guess what? If you don't have control of the level of deuterium versus hydrogen in, Jesse, have you been thermodynamically wise as a silly talking monkey? The answer is no. See, the thing is, if you don't know that's important, you're going to go out and buy the machine because some functional medicine doctor told you it's the greatest thing in the world. Well, Uncle Jack's not going to tell you that.
So what about like the frequencies of 5G and the oxygen in the body at 60 gigahertz, does it deplete the oxygen? Like, if
Yeah,
it
it
starts
does.
these higher levels, is that what we saw when we saw the people dropping in Wuhan? Did they light up the 5G and they you know, is that a plausible, you know, a possibility?
I wouldn't say it's plausible. I wouldn't say it's plausible. I would say that does it lower the redox potential? Yes, because as you mentioned, you threw a lot at me there. Most people need to understand when the frequencies of terrestrial sunlight, that's the EMF that you're designed to work with, is about 250 to 760. When you start going from 0 to 5G, the ranges that you're going up in is tremendous. Oxygen does have an electromagnetic frequency that it operates best at. Turns out that solar radiation is the key, and that's what your mitochondria is optimized to. So if you happen to live in a heavily populated area like Wuhan, and you're surrounded by, you know, just for argument's sake, 20 million people, and all of them are using 5G phone, this goes back to the story that we said in the beginning of the podcast. These are two identical twins in two separate rooms. Is what happened in Wuhan equivalent to say that what happened in Valdosta, Georgia? The answer is no. And this is the reason why I always try to tell people, take a look at Wuhan compared to, say, South Florida. South Florida has a ton of 5G, but it doesn't have the same population density as Wuhan. And the interesting thing is the population density in Florida is much older than what was in Wuhan. So you would have assumed with COVID that we should have way more deaths in that area, but we didn't. You want to know why? You want to take a guess based on what we've already talked about in the first 22 minutes? Is the light, water, and magnetism is way optimized for Florida than it is in Wuhan. But see, did Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx or did any of your other guests ever come on and say, what about light, water, magnetism? Which one is more optimized? So you begin to understand that people who have high vitamin D levels, why? Because you make that from UVB light at 312 nanometers. You don't get that in Wuhan. Why? Because of the pollution, but also because it's much higher latitude. Well, guess what? At the 24th to 28th latitude, which is the latitude of Florida, you can be a pretty old person with shitty mitochondria, high heteroplasmy, and you're still not going to die. You know, this is the interesting thing. If you remember the fight between DeSantis and Cuomo, you know, everybody assumed that Florida was going to kill everybody. You heard it on the news and all the nightmare stuff. And guess what? Who turned out to be right? Turns out nature always wins. But you know the problem is the people on mainstream media, Mockingbird media, want to teach you centralized approach. They want to make sure roll the sleeve up and take the shot. That's what they precondition your mind to. So when I come on and do a podcast like I'm doing with you, I want people to know I'm not some crazy wahoo, but I am dead serious about people understanding that you have to understand the thermodynamics of biology. You have to understand it in the proper framework, and you have to understand your mitochondria dictates how energy flows in your system. And if energy flows at a good level, I don't care if you kiss somebody with COVID, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, I actually, I did a whole bunch of different changes in my life. 8.5 years ago, I stopped drinking alcohol. 8 years ago, I stopped all synthetic drugs. 7.5 years ago, I stopped smoking cigarettes. But when I stopped eating meat, almost 5 years ago, I haven't had a cold or a flu since. And I didn't wear a mask. I didn't get a shot. I'm not worried. I go out everywhere. I hug people. And I haven't had a cold or flu since I stopped putting meat into my body. Plus possibly the other things, and, you know, a lot more better nutrition, a lot more fruits and vegetables, you know, maybe a lot healthier and happier than I was. But, you know, I haven't got this, whatever it is, COVID or whatever it is that's going around. And, you know, is that because, you know, my immune system, my body, it can fight off anything?
Well, no, I would tell you, I don't know about your thermodynamic limits. The one thing that you did say to me that I would caution your readers about, where you and I are in complete disagreement, eating meat or not eating meat doesn't protect you. That's, if you buy the vegan ideas, you've gone down a really bad rabbit hole. This is a Ferrari engine in your head. That Ferrari engine is made with more DHA. DHA only comes from animal products, specifically the marine seafood chain. What's the benefit of meat? Very simply, red meat that's grass-fed. What's in the grass? DHA. It cow eats the DHA, turns it from SN1 and 3 into SN2. SN2 is the only way it gets in here. And this is the key. The eye, where your eye clock is that controls all these decentralized processes in your body. It's called the supracosmatic nucleus. Every neurosurgeon knows about it. Very few patients know about it. The more accurate the controller is here, everything else in your body is extremely accurate. So if you want to blame it on food, I'll let you do that. I'll allow you to lie to yourself. I won't let my people go that route. You have to understand the mechanisms. And it turns out animal products, when you have a Ferrari engine, are mandatory. People who are vegan, and we see this, I'll give you a perfect example, because this offends people when I tell it to them. For 5,000 years, we had people in southern India who are all vegetarian or vegan do very well. Why? Because they're at the 20th latitude. They had optimized light, water, and magnetism. They had no problems. They had no real major chronic disease. 25, 30 years ago, we started having technology companies move to Bangalore and Bangladesh and things like that. And all of a sudden, the largest cohort in the world that developed diabetes is now Indians. So you have to ask yourself, is the food protective or was the environment ruined? And if you really take a step back and look at it, you'll begin to find out that food is a very small part of the story. It turns out the environment that you live in, the electromagnetic environment you live in, is by far the most important part. And it turns out that India has always had good light, water, and magnetism. In fact, it's one of the few places in Asia that's optimized for magnetism because the continent is crashing up against Asia, creating the mountains up there, the Himalayas. So there's always a benefit. But what has radically changed in 30 years is now all the call centers for Google and Facebook are now irradiating these people constantly. It's become Silicon Valley of Asia. And as a result, the largest cohort of diabetics on planet Earth doesn't live in the United States, does not live in Australia. As the media will tell you, they live in southern India, and they're all vegetarians, and they all eat fruit.
Yeah, I still I'm not a vegan. I could never be a vegan. I eat, I could never obviously quit honey. I eat cheese. I eat eggs every day. So I'm still eating, some animal products. So I'm not a vegan, and I don't believe in that. But I know I've heard lots of cardiologists talk about how red meat has been a big issue.
Think about what you just said. You heard a lot of cardiologists tell you this. Centralized doctors telling you something that they guarantee they can wallet biopsy you off. Let me just tell you something. If you believe the cholesterol hypothesis, you've been sold probably the biggest lie of the 20th century, starting with answer keys on. Cholesterol has no role in heart disease. The real story about heart disease is, remember, silly talking monkeys buried their mitochondrial density here in our heart. That's the reason why heart disease and neurodegeneration are the two things that are killing us the most. What have we done in the last probably 50 years? We've now changed our environment. Think about what we're doing right now. You're inside, I'm outside. I'm outside right now at the 13th latitude. That's the biggest change. And the thing is, when you realize that technology forces you inside from outside, and you don't realize the degree that it's done it, you begin to get a lot of false ideas like the cardiologists have. It's the same thing I was telling somebody when I was in the pool the other day, the story about dermatologists, because I want to make sure you understand. I'm not trying to be an asshole to you. I really want you to understand this. In the dermatology literature that's published, the same things are published in cardiology. We're going to go back to the cardiology story, but I want you to see the link. In the dermatology literature, it shows that if you get melanoma, basal cell, or squamous cell, any of the three skin cancers, it's always associated with low vitamin D levels. So then you have to ask yourself, wait a minute. Dermatologists and ophthalmologists tell everybody that the sun is toxic for us and we need to use sunscreen. So why is it that the people that actually get cancer are the ones that are out of the sun? So then you have to ask yourself, to solve your Dunning-Kruger problem, is there data to support what Jack's saying? If you're looking at my face, you can probably see I'm pretty red. I'm pretty sunburned. I mean, take a look. Okay, that's not bad for a white guy with freckles from the 59th latitude. So you can see, I've read the literature, and I know in 2016, there was an article published in Sweden, a meta-analysis that showed that compared cigarette smoking and solar exposure. Do you know what it said? It said those people who avoid the sun have bigger risk than those who smoke cigarettes. Now, remember when I started this podcast, I said to you, sometimes smoking cigarettes, not always a big problem. And people look at me when I say this, I'm like, you have not read the literature. So I'm a nightmare for dermatologists. Why? Because I use their own literature against them. See, the reason that they go against their literature is because this allows people to be wallet bots so they can pay their Mercedes payments, their house payments, and things like that. Because if you're as white as Casper the Ghost, you're going to get more disease. And that's actually what the system is optimized for. It's optimized not for reversal of disease. They want to manage your disease. Well, the best way to manage it is always keep you sick. Now let's go back to the cardiologists to tell you that this isn't just a conspiracy theory by ophthalmologists and dermatologists. Flip side is the Framingham Heart Study, the best known heart study in the world. Started in 1948, ended in 1999. It was published in every major journal. Do you know what it said, Jesse, at the end, after studying people for 50 years? Those with the highest cholesterol levels lived the longest, and those with the lowest died the soonest and also died of cancer. Has a cardiologist ever told you that? And yet, it was published in the New York Times. It was published in the Boston Globe. You can go back and read the damn paper right now. But this is the point I'm trying to tell you. Centralized medicine controls the narrative. If you're a black swan mitochondriac like I teach people, I tell you to go right back to the source, read the original source, and see what they said, and then go from there. See, a guy like you that just said what you said about meat, you come from Ansel Keys, and Ansel Keys used the 7-country study to create this nightmare. He was probably the biggest boost assist. I think he's the Anthony Fauci of his time for Big Pharma, for Merck and Pfizer, to make cholesterol drugs. Cholesterol drugs prior to probably COVID, biggest scam in centralized medicine, okay? And the reason I say that, we now know 50 years later, what do all statins do? They're mitochondrial toxins. Oh, let's stop there for a minute, Jesse. What does that mean? It means makes less energy through your mitochondria. So do you see why Uncle Jack is a little bit chapped ass about this idea? Yeah, because guess what? You're going to have problems cognitively when you take these drugs a long time, and you may even have problems here. Turns out the only benefit that's ever showed up with the use of statins is what we call a rheologic effect, meaning it reduces some inflammation in the heart. You get way better results when having high vitamin D levels. Why? Because it turns out people that have heart disease have the lowest vitamin D levels. People that get Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, frontotemporal dysplasia, lowest vitamin D levels. Again, it's not that vitamin D is the be-all, end-all. It's a proxy for your redox state. Now, you've heard me mention redox multiple times. Let's define what redox is. It's the net negative charge inside a cell. It's no different than what's in your car battery. Like, and Jesse, I don't know where you live, but we're just going to make believe you live in Manitoba right now, okay?
I'm close. So I'm in Calgary. I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Perfect. Canada.
Perfect. So we're going to say you're in Calgary. It's minus 50 out. So you call AAA because your car doesn't start. They come and jump it. What do? They're effectively putting a net negative charge into your battery, start it up. Your alternator goes, recharge your battery, you're good. Well, it turns out that's what you're supposed to do every day. So, Jesse, tell me, how successful do you think you are right now in Calgary versus Uncle Jack down here in El Salvador? I'm at the 13th latitude. You're about 46. Even on August 23rd, you got good sun where you are now, but you're still not as good as the AAA battery. And remember, as you get older, the net negative charge in you goes down. That's what heteroplasmy is. It means the mitochondrial battery in you gets worse over time. What is natural aging? It's the decline in your battery function in mitochondria that happens naturally. A guy named Doug Wallace told us that it declines via nature about 10% every decade you're there. So when you understand this, I tell people the older they get, the more sun they need, the better optimization of water needs to be. Their magnetism also has to be optimized. So this is the reason why when I started my life, I lived kind of where you did, in New York. And my entire life over 60 years, what have I done? I've wound up and I try to get as close as I can for as long as I can to equatorial environments. Why? Because I know if I want to keep talking to guys like you and educating people, I got to take care of this Ferrari engine. And I have to explain to you why I do some of the things I do, because I know compared to other guests that you have on here, I am going to blow their modus operandi out of the water, but I want you to know why I'm doing it. See, I don't care if you like me or not. What I care about is you get told the truth, okay? And then you can examine it for yourself. You know, I always tell people it's the mark of an educated mind to take something you functionally do not believe, examine it for yourself, and then see, am I crazy or not? And what you're eventually going to find is that the laws or the laws of physics scale all the way down to mitochondria. Like, they're the same in Jupiter as they are in our mitochondria. The problem is what's changed between Jupiter and Earth is the environment we're optimized to. And where we are on Earth is absolutely the key to maintaining your mitochondrial function for as long as you possibly can. I'm not trying to tell anybody, if you become a member of my website, you listen to me, that, you know, you're going to live to 122 like Gene Calmet. But what I am going to tell you, you're not going to get wallet bopsy by my profession. You're not going to get stuck buying supplements from a functional medicine doctor. And you're certainly not, you know, going to take, you know, a bunch of herbs from a naturopathic doctor and think that, you know, you're going to cure your heart disease. Because if you believe that, then you believe in voodoo.
About 15 years ago, I worked for a tanning lotion manufacturer, and I was the marketing and education coordinator. So I did a lot of research into the sun and the sun scare industry, that they try to scare people away from the sun. And then the same people that, you know, the pharmaceuticals are the one that own the cancer foundations and the foundations that are trying to help you, but they're owned by the same people that are trying to get you out of the sun and lather up with their toxic sunscreens.
It's absolutely true. I mean, that's look, ultimately, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, we could probably talk for hours about it, because it's one of the things I'm pretty passionate about. All of this has started basically from the Rockefellers to try to figure out how to centralize medicine, meaning have a single controller so that you could create customers. Today, besides the Rockefeller Foundation, pretty much every single company that's a big pharma company came from Standard Oil. But people need to realize who's their governmental proxies now. It's actually the World Economic Forum, the WHO, the FDA. These are all the bureaucracies that now do the bidding, you know, of centralized medicine. I'm not trying to tell you that everything that's done in centralized medicine is bad. That's not true. I'm not saying that. There's certain things that they do that I can get behind. But I get behind it when I understand the thermodynamics behind it, okay? And if I think net it's a positive, then I'm going to tell you that. Most of the things I have a problem with, I hate half-truths. And most of that I focus in on allopathic medicine, but I will tell you, the last probably 5 years, I've probably become very unpopular in functional medicine podcasts because they do the same thing that allopathic medicine docs do. They treat through the prescription pad. Functional medicine doctors treat through supplements. And I can't tell you how many people I see that spend $2,000 to $3,000 a month on crap they don't need, and they never get better. And how is that a better system? And how do you not tell people about their environment? You know, I have a pretty famous saying that is really axiomatic. You asked me to really put it down simply. You cannot get well in the same environment you got sick in. You have to change your environment to really reverse your disease. Now, when you realize the totality of what I just said, that's a big deal, because it's really hard for people. Say if you have leukemia, you have a cancer. What do you mean I have to pick up and leave? But I work here, my family's here. Like, well, you have to decide, how much do you like yourself? You know, are you that person on the Titanic that would rather sit and listen to the music, or do you want to get your ass in that boat, you know, so you don't drown? Ultimately, that choice comes to you. That's why I tell people, choices in and around your environment actually the hinges of destiny. I got to get people away from bad ideas. Food is important, but it's so low down on the list, it's not worth talking about. And if you're going to talk about it, then we need to talk about why it's important. It's not important because of carbohydrates, lipids, and fats. It's actually important because what's the input to mitochondria called, Jesse? electron chain transport, how much you know about electrons in food. Okay, that's where you got to start. Then you got to say, okay, what do the protons do in mitochondria? Where do they come from? 3 dehydrogenases that are in mitochondria that take out light protein and make the ATPase spin. It takes 3.4 of those light hydrogen to go through the FO head and make 1 ATP. When your food guys come on here and tell you that level of sophistication, then I will tell you your people who listen to you should listen to them. Until they do that,
now, what kind of water do you suggest? Because there's a lot of, differing opinions on it. I actually drive an hour with my girlfriend and get spring water. We get it right from the ground. We fill up a whole bunch of jugs, and we do that, once every, 2-3 weeks or whatever. And we drink real spring water. Some people believe in, the ozonated water. Some people believe in reverse osmosis. And then some people believe that distilled water is the only way to go. What's your thoughts on what's the optimal water for, our bodies?
I answered that one for you already, but I'm going to go over it with you. Where you live, you're lucky. Water is optimized in northern Canada. Turns out that the hydrology cycle, the way it works, the first melt off the mountains up there from the creates the springs is actually deuterium depleted. So it's like around 140, 145 parts per million. So it turns out the way nature works, if you think about the Earth as a globe, at the poles, water is deuterium depleted the most. Okay? It turns out at the equatorial region, water has the most deuterium in it. Now, think about why that'd be the case, Jesse, based on E equals MC squared. What is nature telling you? Where sunlight is poor, it needs no deuterium at all. That's the reason why polar water is better. Turns out that deuterium doesn't matter as much when you live in equatorial environments. Why? Because the sun is so powerful, it drives redox. So the heavier mass that's in there doesn't matter. So then you got to ask yourself a question. Wait a minute. If I'm a sick human and I live at a high latitude, I probably need even more deuterium depletion than even my spring water would get me. So that would be the case where I would tell you buying deuterium depleted water may be a smart move, especially if you know you live 8 months out of the year and you don't have good sun, which is the case where you live. I would tell somebody, like, if they had a significant disease, do what I do. I'm at the 13th latitude. And normally, I live at the 28th latitude. You think, geez, the 28th latitude is pretty damn good year-round. We always make vitamin D. I don't think it's that good. Why? Because I'm 60 years old. And I told you, as I get older, I need much more sunlight. Do I drink deuterium-depleted water? I do. I drink Icelandic water, Voss, almost all the time. In fact, in here right now. So water becomes really important for people who have poor sunlight. People who have really good sunlight, I don't think you need to waste your money on fancy water. And as opposed to all the things you asked me about. Do I think ozonation? Do I think alkalinization? Do I think molecular hygiene? Any of those things, those are all gimmicks designed for marketing. And remember what marketing is. It's legalized lying. Okay? That's what it is. You need to understand what your mitochondria is functionally doing. The goal of a mitochondria is to create energy, to create water, and create CO2. And you need to understand what water and CO2 are doing. Turns out the reason why deuterium-depleted water your mitochondria is interested is it buries the most sunlight in that water. It creates what we call an exclusion zone. And the larger the exclusion zone is, the more net negative charge it has. If you want to learn more about that, you read a book written by Gerald Pollack. It's called The Fourth Phase of Water. He gets into it. He doesn't get into all the biology stuff, but it teaches you how water is the major battery for biology. And what does that water do? Water that's created by your mitochondria is in a liquid crystalline form called H3O2. Why is that important? It changes the atomic relationship inside the cell. So know that the TCA cycle is surrounded by all this water. The TCA cycle does not work if there's deuterium in that water. It actually is less efficient. This is the reason why people who have cancer tend to have broken TCA cycles. They can't make as much water because they're never in enough sun. And that's what leads to the decline in energy production. People never get down to this level of sophistication. So you need to understand that. And no, I hate to tell you, drinking deuterium-depleted water isn't as good as getting it from the sun. What's the other way we get it, Jesse? This is the part you're probably not going to like. Turns out saturated fats have the highest level of protein. So think about what your cardiologist told you. Oh, saturated fats are terrible. Here's point case. The best saturated fats on the planet, butter, coconut oil, and palm oil, you make more water per unit mole from saturated fat than you do from any other fat. And guess where saturated fats are in predominantly? Animals. They're not in plants. See, that's why I said all these little pieces add up, and you start going, man, we've been fed a line of bullshit for a long time.
Well, that's one thing. If anybody does any research at all, is they've inverted, they've perverted, they lie, to distract and divide. That's what they've been doing. So to disseminate the truth, it's hard, and you have to really look for answers. And when I was working at the sun tanning lotion manufacturer, they got taught about that we only get vitamin D from the sun for 4 months of the year, like you said. The other 8 months a year, you basically get zero vitamin D, even if it's, sunny and plus 20 in January, because the level of the sun rays, it actually bounces off and we don't actually get absorption. So I was telling people that it's good to, go to tanning beds, to actually get some sun tanning, because you can actually get vitamin D. And I was telling my friend with really, really dark skin, because one thing I learned, the darker your pigment, the more vitamin D that you need. And I'm saying you should actually go to these tanning beds. And he's like, oh, I'm chocolate dark. He goes, what are they going to look at me like if I go up and I try to get some tanning minutes? And I said, but you're doing it for vitamin D production. So do you recommend those tanning beds or supplementation by vitamin D? What would be more something that you recommended for people that are living in environments that they're only getting the vitamin D for 4 months of the year?
Well, let me give you the caveats first. Let's get the controversy out of the way. Taking vitamin D tablets is equivalent to going to the gym, asking the trainer to do push-ups for you, and thinking you're getting a benefit. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I do advocate vitamin D tablets for people who have acute illnesses that we're trying to get over, but for a very short basis. You have to get to the sun to make it. Why? Because 312 nanometer light is what changes the cholesterol esters in the skin to vitamin D. You have to have that. Now, your point about the tanning beds, am I a fan of them? No, and I'll tell you why. They are not full spectrum sunlight. They only have UVA and UVB in them. They will create vitamin D in you. I'm okay with that. I feel the same way about them as I do about supplements. But what light is the best? Ones that have UVA, UVB, and near infrared. You have to have red and purple light together, because many people don't get told this. I have a blog on my Patreon blog, how to build your solar callus. When you get a ton of red light, most people don't know that our sun is 43% infrared A light. That's between 600 and 1,000 nanometers. What you don't get told is 600 and 1,000 nanometer light preconditions your skin for UV. In other words, you get less red when you have the IR light, whether your skin is dark or not. Darkness of your skin tells you that you're optimized for tropical light. So your point that those people need more UV light is absolutely true. No question about it. But if you're going to use fake light to try to reproduce what the sun does, my opinion, you got to use red with the UVA and UVB. And there is no tanning beds either in Europe or in North America that do that. So that means you have to have two separate lights, use the red light properly, and then use the black light properly. And unfortunately, most of the people that are in tanning salon business, they have their head up their ass. They don't understand any of this. I teach people this on my Patreon blog. Obviously, you probably figured out, Jesse, I'm a much bigger fan of using nature. We're optimized to that 43% of red light and sun. Where does that 43% of red light come from? The atomic spectrum of hydrogen, meaning protium, is red. So realize when I tell you that the sun is predominantly burning hydrogen to create red light. And what does your mitochondria like? It only likes H+. That's the wireless connection between your mitochondria. That frequency of that light optimizes what's going on in your cytochromes. Here's where it even gets more interesting. Now I'm really taking you down the rabbit hole. Inside your mitochondria, through electron chain transport, I'm sure you've had other guests on that explain you have 5 cytochromes. Cytochrome 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Cytochrome 5 is the ATPase. Cytochrome 1 is probably the most important one. That's the NADH and NAD positive couple. N stands for nicotinamide. Nicotinamide is made from tryptophan. Tryptophan is an aromatic amino acid that absorbs between 220 and 400. So it's a UV light chromophore. But here's the interesting thing. There's 5, let me get my hand, 5 red light chromophores in mitochondria. So you have proteins in you that are optimized for red light. What's also unusual about red light? It penetrates our body. The optical density of our skin, our muscles, our bone allow penetration of red light between 10 and 30 centimeters. Guess why? Because that light has to get to the mitochondria to inform the mitochondria what to do. That's what the hydrogen in the sun is effectively doing. And you need that red light before you jump straight to UV light. And it turns out the 2 change programs in mitochondria, most people have heard of them. One's called autophagy, the other one's called apoptosis. What's autophagy? It's when the engine is so bad, your body recycles it. What controls that? Red light. What is apoptosis? Apoptosis, everybody who has cancer has broken apoptosis. What frequency of light controls apoptosis? UVA and UVB light. So you start going, wait a minute, what does apoptosis do? The engine's so bad, we got to get rid of the whole cell and make a new cell from our stem cells. So everyone that has cancer has a problem with apoptosis. What is the neurohormone that controls autophagy and apoptosis in humans? Melatonin. Did you know your mitochondria makes melatonin? And people start going, wait a minute, I thought melatonin was the hormone of darkness. Turns out it's not. You know why? It's made out of tryptophan, just like NAD is. And tryptophan absorbs what? UV light. So how does it work? You're designed to be out in AM sun, like I am right now, okay? And that takes the 6-carbon chain benzene ring, absorbs the light. How does that work? A guy named Einstein, you may have heard of, won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect. It excites the electrons, the pi electrons on that ring. And at night, 4 hours of darkness, that light is given back to the proteins. That's how it really works, okay? When you understand that, you begin to go, so this is the reason why sleep is so important, because that's the time where we optimize apoptosis and autophagy so that our electric charge coming out of our mitochondria is rock starish. See, if you stay up late at night and eat like a rabbit, a lot of fruit and vegetable, or, ice cream, or, this and that, you're ruining that process. And it happens chronically over time. So what happens in the mitochondria, functionally? Decreased DC electric current in your body, which we can measure externally, like I do it for my patients with a magnetoencephalogram. We can measure it via an EKG. We can also measure it through the amount of water your mitochondria makes. Why? We can look at your BUN and creatinine ratio. We know that people are dehydrated. Their mitochondria is not making enough water. These are all the proxies that we can check. These are all the things that functional medicine doctors and allopathic doctors, I'm going to be probably tactless here, they shit the bed on. Why? Because they don't have the level of knowledge that they need to have to understand why these processes go. And that's the reason why podcasts like this are important, because I want people to stop believing their narratives they've been sold. I mean, the fastest way for you to ruin sleep is to turn your iPhone on and look at the screen. Blue light, which is part of the solar spectrum, is not equivalent to what the sun does. Blue light has to be balanced by red light. There's no red light in your phone. So what does blue light effectively do to your mitochondria? It destroys melatonin levels. So people want to know why they don't sleep. It's because their abuse of blue light or non-native EMF, which is what you talked about before, the 5G story. So can you have good sleep if you live, say, in a city of 100 million people, or I should say a city of 1 million people, who are all using Netflix, and the antenna is within a mile of your house? The answer is no. What's your ultimate plan? Move to a lower latitude place where there's not a lot of obedient idiots that are addicted to technology. So where am I right now? I'm in a place where there's not even 20,000 people. So it doesn't matter if they're all using 5G. Now compare that, say, back to my place in Destin, Florida. Oh, in the summertime right now, there's probably 500,000 people there because it's the summertime, and they're all down there and they're all using, you know, Netflix, their music apps and everything else. Why is Jack in the middle of the summer leaving his house at the 28th latitude? I just answered the question because what did I tell you? I got to take care of this. That's why every single study you look at, Jesse, shows if you want to improve your sleep, just go get 4 hours out in nature anytime. I don't even care what latitude you're at. You need to stay away from humans that are addicted to technology. But you need to realize the real diet you need to be on is a tech diet, not a food diet.
So Zara from our Facebook out of Kelowna, Canada, she asks, I wonder if my flux filter on the computer screen actually kills the bad blue light.
It does, but Flux isn't good enough. It's a nice, cheap app. There's a better one that's out there. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Iris software. The reason why, blue light also has another problem. Blue light flickers. And we have cells in our retina called Mueller cells, and that causes stroboscopic effects. What's the most common stroboscopic effect that most people have heard about? That's migraine headaches. So flickering a blue light, that means anytime an artificial light is connected to the AC power grid anywhere in the world, that light flickers. If you don't believe me, all of us have probably had the experience of being around the fluorescent light. When it goes bad, it starts to flicker and you can see it. What you don't know is when the light is brand new, it still flickers at 20,000 cycles per second. Your brain can't see it. But it turns out, guess what? Your Mueller cells do it. It goes straight into your brainstem and causes hypermethylation of your TCA cycle. Ruins all kinds of things in you. And the most common problem that you get from that is migraines. But are there other diseases out there like neuralgias, like cranial nerve neuralgias? People have heard of trigeminal neuralgia. It's another thing that's a problem. So you can always tell people who like to put their cell phone up to the side of their head, look at the cell phone, or they're always around LED or fluorescent lights, which is why, I got on your case a little bit, and I'm not trying to pick on you. You need to start doing all your podcasts outside. That's how I try to do most of mine. Why? Because I know that I'm killing myself by talking to you. I think it's important to talk to you. But if I can do it outside while I'm in nature, optimized for the EMF that I'm designed for, then I think it's worth it because I may touch a couple of people in your audience and go, I'm going to try this. I'm going to start doing something a little bit different.
So being outside and actually grounding, if you had your feet in the sand or on the grass, would that even be more beneficial if you're around this technology?
Absolutely. Just think about it like this. Let's make it simple and then get to the complex. So why does your coffee have that 3-prong thing in it? Well, there's a grounding cord that's in there. And it turns out more power is generated from the AC power grid through your coffee maker to make coffee when you have a 3-prong plug. Doesn't mean it won't work if it's just got 2. But that third one really helps the situation. Now let's take it to us. And I'm going to give you the evolutionary reason here that you need to understand this. Why do humans really have to walk at beaches as much as possible? You know that we're the silly talking monkey that has sweat glands on our feet and hands. Do you know that our cousins, the chimps, don't? You know why? Their environment, they're optimized for hugging trees where they get the magnetic flux from the ground when they're up in the trees. We're not designed for that. We're a bipedal, okay? So we have sweat glands on our hands and feet to connect to the earth. Why does this work? How does it work? The sun is a cathode ray. When a cathode ray hits an anode, all the planets in the solar system are anodes. Anytime a cathode ray hits a planet, free electrons are liberated. Jesse, what's the input to mitochondria? Electron chain transport. That's the reason why you ground, because you know what you're doing? You're getting a free energy source when you're connected to your planet. Remember what I told you about where we came from? East African Rift. That's where 3 tectonic plates meet. That means there's a huge magnetic flux there, right on the ocean. You understand? When you start seeing this, you say, God bless. Now I see why chimps became humans, because that area was optimized for light, water, and magnetism. So it allowed us to make frontal lobes. It allowed us to change our body plan because the charge density of that environment was highly favorable. This is the reason why humans didn't evolve in Alaska. It's why humans didn't evolve in Antarctica. And you need to realize that. So you're a guy that lives in northern Canada. Hopefully, when I say this to you, you're going to go, maybe I can start eating back off the fruit. Maybe I need to consider moving to the 28th latitude. Or maybe I need to buy a summer house down lower so that when it sucks in Canada, I go down there, because you may find extra gears in your health that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, I used to live in Cancun, and I felt some of the healthiest time that I felt when I was living in Cancun. And about 4 years ago, I crashed a motorbike through a lawyer's office window in Thailand, and I was stuck in Thailand for like about 3 months. And besides my broken foot, I felt healthy. The pounds were shedding off, and like it's just I felt really, really great in some of these warmer clients. But we have here Mandy from our Facebook says, some of us don't have the choice as to where we live. So what can we do if we're only getting vitamin D for 4 months out of the year? How do we optimize, just being stuck in wherever, a person may be stuck due to financial reasons?
Yeah, Mandy's not going to like my answer. Then you have to be okay with suboptimal results. See, biology makes you pay a toll. That toll is in disease. So remember I told you before that choices are the engines of destiny? You have to do everything possible. This is what I would say to Mandy. The single most important asset you have in your life is time. How you value your time will determine how motivated you are to change your environment. That's as simple as I can put it. I understand that economic, social reasons mandate that people have to stay there. But here's what I'm telling you, man. Do not waste your money on BS stories if you don't change your environment. Save your money, even to take a week trip or 2 week trip down to the 13th latitude, down to the 10th latitude, down to the 20th latitude at Cancun. Because that 7-10 day trip will have much more benefit to you than going out and wasting your money on supplements. Chemtrails are a big issue. They reduce the terrestrial spectrum of sunlight. You can see that. You live in a city where there's a lot of chemtrails and you have a spectroscope, you go outside, you'll notice that UV light and infrared A light is reduced compared to other places. So it's no doubt. And, I always use the story for this, Jesse. If you came down to my house with your wife and we put water and nutrients in the ground and planted an orange tree, and then your wife came out and threw a tarp over it, would we get any oranges? No.
I know.
That's what chemtrails effectively do to living things on the planet. Now it's being done because of people in the World Economic Forum, people like Bill Gates, who think that blocking the sun's a wise thing. Why? Because when you block the sun, then they're going to give you centralized, lifestyle prescriptions that they can benefit from. It's all about the profiteer. So this is the reason why, if you happen to live in a place like Seattle, or I would tell you Vancouver is another place that's heavily chemtrailed. In fact, even Alaska is. You need to move out of those places. Staying there for a long period of time in this modern life, it's a prescription for disaster.
So a
become a really good customer.
A lot of people, talk about how money is a big factor behind a lot of what these people do, and it seems like the ones who are the controllers, the rulers, the puppet masters, they print the money. They got all the money. So it's, if you go high enough and you go deep enough down the rabbit hole, money isn't what motivates these people. So are they looking to genocide, or are they feeding off our pain and suffering, and they're just trying to cause as much of that as possible?
Well, I think it's about control and compliance, to be honest with you. I mean, if you think about centralized systems, just about everything in business is centralized. But let's talk about something you may not realize that I also happen to be pretty expert in, is decentralized money. You remember that fiat money, all our fiat money, wherever it is, we're talking about paper or coinage, that's controlled usually by a central bank. Central banks try to control us that way. I mean, it's very classically seen, in your country this winter, what they did with the Canadian truckers. They went after their bank accounts. They try to stop GoFundMe accounts, even when people in the United States are sending the truckers Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is decentralized money. No one can control it. So guys like me are huge fans of decentralized money. Why? Because of what Mandy said earlier. If Mandy took some of her retirement money, some of her wealth, and bought Bitcoin right now, Mandy would have the money to actually move down to Cancun in 5 years. And many people do not believe that $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 can turn into several $1 million. But with Bitcoin, that's going to happen over the next 10 or 15 years. That will change your life. But the problem is, you're not going to jump down that rabbit hole until you understand what decentralized money means compared to centralized money. And the simple thing, right now, it's very easy to explain to people because globally, inflation is present everywhere. I mean, the United States has it, Canada has it. There's not a country on earth that doesn't have it. The one country that's prepared for inflation is actually El Salvador. They sit at the 13th latitude. Why? They made it legal tender last August. So for 1 year, it's been present there. They don't use it that much yet. But when American money blows up, because what does American money do? It started in 1913 here, and now it's gone down. So $1 in 1913 today is only worth 2 cents. That comes through money printing. What Bitcoin does is exactly the opposite. It started out 13 years ago at less than 1 cent. Today it's now around $25,000. So you look at yourself, then you go, okay, let me see what Bitcoin's done over its 13 years compared to every other asset that's centralized. And you'll find out that it's outperformed everything. Now, it's a volatile asset, don't get me wrong. But that's not what Mandy should be asking. Mandy should say, well, I can't get out economically. Well, guess what? If you stick with your plan and you dollar cost average into Bitcoin in 5 or 6 years, you'll come back and thank Jesse that he had me on this podcast, because that's how you do it. And remember, even when it comes to money, I'm going to tell you, your biology should be decentralized. Your money should be decentralized for the same reasons, because your money will get you to the environment that you need to be in.
Some people believe, or, talks under the underground, that Bitcoin is, used for the dark money, the weapons, the child trafficking, and all that kind of thing. And that's one of the places that they want to take out is the Bitcoin. And there's going to be other cryptos that are going to actually take its place.
Yeah, I mean, the number one dark money in the world is American dollars. It's the biggest, most abused system in the world. Why? You can print more of it. The CIA has been expert in doing that with their clandestine operations. Same thing is true with the NSA. No dollar system is more corrupt than the United States government. And this is part of the reason why the United States government is now woken up to the fact that taxpayers in the United States who understand Bitcoin. Just remember what just happened. Joe Biden just tried to hire, or he's going to hire, through his Inflation Reduction Act, 90,000 IRS agents. Do you know why? He wants to keep everybody in the United States so he can keep biting their neck, just like a vampire does, so that you never get wise enough so that you buy Bitcoin. They want you to stay in whatever single government money that supports their narratives. It's no different than Big Pharma. It's no different than the functional medicine docs. And, you may think that this is sour grapes or, hyperbole. I'm okay with that. You got to run your own race. My goal is to teach people what I see, to explain to you why I believe what I believe. But I can tell you the same thing I believe about biology. I told you this earlier, over an hour ago. Biology, the most fundamental issue is clock management. It's the circadian mechanism. Remember, circadian biology is all about time. It's about the light and dark cycle. Light and dark cycle is functionally a story about time. What is the Bitcoin algorithm built around? It's built around time. In fact, if you read Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, 6 out of the 9 references are about time stamping. So when you actually begin to understand that mitochondria and Bitcoin are basically machines that are thermodynamic time machines, if you optimize for both, you can actually have an optimized life.
Is all kinds of cryptocurrencies going to be valuable? Because I don't have a lot of extra money, but
only Bitcoin. Only Bitcoin. I don't want anybody to save in fiat. I don't want anybody to buy Ethereum. I don't want anybody. I call all the other coins shit coins. Those are like going to the casino. I mean, there's certain people that enjoy going to the casino, for entertainment. That's not me. I don't want to lower my dopamine level because that's what a casino does. No windows, all blue light, so that you lose your money. That's the game. They got that idea from the federal government. The federal government does the same thing. Aren't they doing the same thing with our, 0G to 5G platform? All of our screens are based on blue light. I mean, it's not that hard to create a screen that's red light based, but why is it they don't do it? Because they're trying to control us. And they do an effective job through propaganda because of their friends in the media. You need to understand how you're being played. And I think when you understand how you're being played and understand that the story not only goes from the financial world, but it also is in the biology world, then you can begin to slowly make changes in your life so that you gain the control and compliance back. And I don't think, I've said for 2 years, I even did a documentary on COVID. I said COVID was a compliance test for a coming economic reset. And everybody laughed. They're not laughing anymore. I've got threads on my forum that are 18 months old that told everybody when literally inflation was less than 1% in the US dollar. I said, you are going to get massive inflation by what's coming. Guess what? I was right. The only way you can pay off $30 trillion in debt is to run inflation at a high rate and make sure you keep unemployment high. That's exactly what the federal government's going to do in the United States probably for the next 3 to 4 decades. But you know what? They don't want you to know that. In fact, your president is doing it to Canadians even worse than me. I've told Canadians this. The American government's bad enough with how much money we've printed. You've actually printed more money than we have. The Canadian dollar has been destroyed. And yet, he's completely trying to lock you guys down. Why? Because he's a big believer in the Klaus Schwab will be happy and own nothing. And Canadians don't seem to push back on it. It seems like the people that are in Quebec and Montreal and Toronto, they keep electing them, and I scratch my head. I have a lot of Canadian members that I got out of Canada before COVID. Some of them listened, and they didn't want to. And they're very happy they did. They sold their houses at record highs. A lot of them bought a lot of Bitcoin. Most of them now live inside the tropics. Like I said, it wasn't just a financial decision. It was actually a biological. I want people to understand that. It's when you understand decentralized networks, like Jesse, I'll give you another one to really hammer this point home. You know how the Japanese built their subway tunnels in Japan? They took a slime mold, put it in the ground, and watched where the slime mold went based on light, water, magnetism. That's actually the system they used to drill the channels for the subways. They used nature because they knew nature would find the most thermodynamic ways to build the tunnels in the right rock. And when I tell people this story, it was brilliant by the Japanese doing this. Now, they totally screwed the pooch when they made the decision to put some of their nuclear power plants in the wrong place. They weren't wise there. They used a centralized idea. I think the more your people understand that living a decentralized life means that you're living by nature's laws, that you're living by thermodynamic principles that optimize time, I think you'll do well.
What about gold and silver? What's your thoughts on that? Because it seems like throughout history, that's something that's kind of increased over time.
Yeah, gold and silver, I'll give you the perfect example. Let's use gold as the example. We've had, since 1971, the Nixon shock, when we got off the gold standard, inflation has been a pretty big problem in the United States. It was really bad in the 70s. It kind of went by the wayside until recently. You know that gold has not done anything in 22 years. It stayed flat. So you have to ask yourself, if gold hasn't moved in the single best environment, which was COVID, is it thermodynamically reflective of what's going on? The answer is no. Turns out, though, Bitcoin has. Remember, the beginning of COVID on March 12th, 2020, Bitcoin was at $3,800 a coin. Today, it's at $25,000. That's a 20x move. You tell me any other place in your portfolio that's moved 20x in 2 years, and I'll kiss your behind.
That makes sense. So here we have Renee from our Facebook says, so eliminate your 401k and get it out of government hands, ? Where to invest that money is my question.
I don't give people financial advice, but I can tell you what I did. I did that. I am not interested. I look at the United States federal government right now as the colonists did in 1774 with King George. I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. I think they're the biggest criminals in the world. Everything that we used to blame on King George, I believe our government in Washington, D.C., they're the biggest criminals in the world. And you know who's at fault? Taxpayers. Because we keep electing the idiots. Just like I told Jesse that I think Canadians are idiots for putting Trudeau in. If we keep putting these people in that keep printing our money and devaluing it, we can't blame them. We have control of the process. You know, there's a lot of people in the United States that think that the government that's in power now, you know, controlled the election. Part of me believes that. I believe there was some hanky-panky in it. But don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of Trump. I think he's as big a problem as the guy on the other side. The reason why is Treasury Secretary worked for Goldman Sachs, who is a former, you know, central banker. These guys steal money. That's what they do. And until we wise up, the best thing that we can do, Jesse, the best vote you can do is to take fiat money and buy Bitcoin. It basically, when you buy Bitcoin, you're telling the politicians in Toronto, you're telling the politicians in Quebec, you're telling the politicians in Melbourne, in Washington, D.C., we're the boss. Look, what does my hat say?
The people?
We
the people.
We the people. That's how the Constitution starts. And you know what? That's the biggest problem with our country now. People are no longer in control of compliance. The government is trying to scare us to do things that they want us to do so they can control our behavior. And we have to be smart enough. This is the reason why I believe when you optimize here, then you begin to see the game that's really being played, because it's a shell game.
What do you think would happen if, say, 30% of, you know, the world, the major countries, North America, Europe, you know, Australia, they all just 30% pulled their money out of fiat money and put it into Bitcoin? Would that have a severe effect, or would we need more?
Yeah. No, it would have a massive effect. I mean, not only that, it would change the dynamic on Wall Street for sure, but would also totally change the bond market. The bond market is kind of like the seat of the global reserve banking system. Do I think the banking system will be brought to its knees? Yes. Do I believe the people have the power to do that? Absolutely. But here's the problem, Jesse. Right now, there's probably only 0.5% of people in the world that know what I just told you about decentralized money. Why? Nobody really understands money. Like if you were to ask your members, what is money? You would get a variety of different answers. They need to go out and learn truly what money is all about and understand how Bitcoin is the only real money that's ever been created. Why? It was created after the great financial crisis in 2008. Why? Because we bailed out the banks. We shouldn't have bailed out the banks. We should let the banks fail. But guess what? The central controllers in the legislative branch, in Treasury, in the executive branch, bailed out their buddies. And who paid the bill? We did. So that's the reason why Nakamoto said, you know what, we need to have money that can't be used to do stuff like that and can't be used to fight a war in Afghanistan, you know, for 20 years that cost us, you know, trillions of dollars. It's a total waste of money. My great-grandchildren will be paying taxes to pay that off. So what's the better answer? Save your money in Bitcoin, opt out of the system, and stop caring what they do. Look, the way you fix politics, take the money out of it. It's the same way you fix a drug problem. Just take the drugs out. You know, I'd say everybody who's going to be a drug addict is always going to be a drug addict. So let them imbibe it. Perfect examples: go to Vancouver. You'll see people all over the place, or Seattle, or Portland. Those people will eventually kill themselves out. Then other people will take the place. Not everybody, you know, needs to have laws made to protect them. If you're not going to use drugs, my same argument with abortion. You want to have an abortion, knock yourself out. I personally don't want to do it, but it's not my job to tell somebody else what to do. Just like it's not my job to tell you to eat meat. You do whatever you want. I mean, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of you having a choice. And unfortunately, I think people don't realize that we have choices. And the problem is sometimes the choices are not great. I mean, think about what Mandy said to me earlier. Jack, I can't do this. I get where she's coming from. But guess what? If you give Mandy an outcome, if you show her that there is a chance for her to do this, even in her compromised situation, she has a way out of her morass. I don't want her to say 10 or 15 years from now that no, nobody ever told me this. I didn't know this. She has to do her due diligence to find out, will this work for her or not? I can tell her this. I think if she stays in the fiat system, she stays at a high latitude life and she's sick, she's going to continue with the biologic tolls and she's going to become more dependent on the system.
What's your thoughts on CO2 and why they're demonizing it so much? Because doesn't most plant life feed on CO2?
Absolutely. Again, this is the World Economic Forum. Bill Gates, Fauci, and all his friends at the WHO. Remember, it's the biggest scam probably of the 21st century. Once COVID's gone, remember, it was a compliance test to see how much of the world they could get to follow. Now, it wasn't as successful as they thought. There's a lot of people out there, especially in my country, that think COVID is a complete joke. The people that died were the people who are going to die. They had low redox. I'm not saying that COVID was not a disease to fear. If you are unhealthy, you're going to get taken out. But that's exactly what it is with every disease. But to make laws against you not going outside and not being able to exercise and going out in nature for a coronavirus where we all know vitamin D is the answer, that told you that they were full of shit. So now that they have an idea of who will comply or not, then what's the next level of the Agenda 21 plan from the World Economic Forum? You're going to have what's going on in Ukraine now. Remember, Zelensky was put in by Klaus Schwab. He's an actor. That's what he is. And his whole goal is to have people eating bugs and eating wheat and eating like a rabbit. This war that's being fought is being really fought for the World Economic Forum agenda. Again, do I think that that's a popular opinion with a lot of people? No, I know it's not. But do I see what Putin's doing? Yeah. He's basically showing the world the most important asset is when you own hard assets in the ground, like oil, okay? And he's going to freeze Europe. He's going to freeze the people that supported turning off nuclear power, which was one of the stupidest decisions ever made by the German people over the last 20 years. And look at electric power. I have a friend who lives in London. He just told me that 6 months ago his power bill was £53. He got his electric bill a week ago, £587.
Wow.
6 months. So guess what? This is August. Can you imagine what it's going to be in November when there's no liquid natural gas? Because remember, the way they make electricity in Europe is radically different than we do it in North America. And your country is even a bigger joke. You're sitting on huge reserves, but guess what? What is Trudeau doing? He doesn't want the pipeline, just like Biden didn't want the pipeline. You're sitting on huge reserves, but you're trying to control that 30 million population. And Putin is showing everybody the other side of the story, saying, I'll show you what broken supply chains can look like. And he's got friends in China. That's the reason why China's kept all the plants closed. This is going to drive global inflation. Why? Because they want a seat at the table when the American dollar blows up. When we get to the next Bretton Woods 3.0. I mean, Bretton Woods happened after World War II, where the United States basically replaced, for want of a better term, the pound sterling. What the next change is going to be is what's going to be the next form of money. My opinion, it'll probably be a basket of digital dollars or central bank digital coins and Bitcoin. And eventually, after 20, 30 years, when people find out that Bitcoin is the only source of thermodynamic powered money that can't be corrupted, eventually, when I'm already dead, my kids will be alive. We'll probably use that as the global reserve currency. At that time, each Bitcoin may be worth, I would say 100 million to $1 trillion. But we're a ways off from that. But is that where it's headed? Yeah, because the current system we're in is unsustainable. And just remember, anybody who tells you to block nature, they are not a friend of a mitochondrial. That's Fauci. That's Perks. That's Gates. Anybody in the WHO. These people want you to eat bugs. They want you to be vegans. They want you to diminish your neural capacity. Why? Because you're easy to control through the media. That's exactly what the game plan is here. You have to see this from a 90,000 foot view. And, you know, most people think this is conspiracy theory. Fine, great. You know, you're not part of my tribe. You keep doing what you're doing, I'll do what I'm doing. The one thing I can tell you is that I'm not going to support a government that I think is abject corrupt. And, you know, Thomas Jefferson, the Federalist Papers, said the patriotic thing to do is not to follow laws that are unjust. Right now, we have more unjust laws in and around our monetary system than anything else in the world. And remember, I'm telling you that every single problem in politics always funnels back to money. That includes medicine. And that's why I said that's the core of centralized control. It's always money. Everybody seems to know that. But like in this podcast that we've been doing for an hour and a half, I'm trying to get you to understand how everything funnels back to them so that you realize it's not a conspiracy theory, so that you can reconstruct your own life, so that you have control, that you do the things that you need to do to run your own race, to stay healthy and not have to plug into that system. Because basically, you're a piece of meat and they're the sausage guy. And right now, they have the control. You have to regain that control by any means possible. You have to be like the Patriots that were in the 13 colonies that thought that they could beat the biggest world power by fighting a militia war, by fighting dirty. You have to do whatever it takes if you want your liberty and freedom. And I would tell you, if you want your liberty and freedom from disease, you have to do the hard things. Move to the tropics. Figure out a way to get there. Do everything you possibly can. Until you get there, optimize light, optimize water, optimize magnetism.
Now, if this is what their plans are and they're squeezing everybody and it seems like they're controlling everything, the central bankers, the World Economic Forum, you know, does it, you know, possible that there isn't a lot of hope, you know, for people say they pull out their money and go into Bitcoin that
I'm very hopeful. I will tell you I'm the biggest optimist you want to know. You know why? The people I interact with, most of them already get it. My tribe, the guys who follow me, I've been telling them this 10 years, 15 years. I've been explaining to them how mitochondrial medicine and cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, marry up, how they are, health and wealth are fundamentally linked. When I come on and do a podcast with a guy like you, and we're talking through these things, I want you to begin to understand how they're linked, because when you see how they're linked and you didn't see the linkage before, in other words, now you're going to start seeing problems through new eyes, new lens. And you'll say, you know what, maybe I need to rethink this position a little bit. That's really my ultimate goal. I want you to know that you do not have to put up with the status quo. You are absolutely capable of doing and running your own race. The thing is, you may have to make some tough decisions sometimes, but if those tough decisions decentralize you, ultimately they will pay off. They may not pay off initially. It may take a while, but you'll win eventually. You'll get your goal. You'll change your fortunes biologically, and you'll probably change your family's fortunes financially.
Yeah, I'm an optimist, and I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if I didn't think that we can, you know, come, you know, and fix the problems that we're all facing here together. My lean here from our Facebook says, wasn't Bitcoin set up by the cabal?
No. Nope. It was set up by a guy named Satoshi Nakamoto, who is a cypherpunk, who actually was motivated after what Geithner, Euler, and all the big banks, the guys that controlled Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they were on the precipice of global collapse. And the decision should have been to let them fail. But if they did that, that would have given control of the central bank to the people. That is absolutely what the Federal Reserve does not want. For you to understand that, you have to go back and read a book that tells you about the history of the Federal Reserve called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Go back and read that book. You'll begin to understand why Bitcoin is the antidote to the central bank. And once you begin to ask questions and you learn more about Bitcoin, there's a lot of Bitcoin books out there. I can list some of them if you want. Bitcoin is made for the people, by the people, to give them control back. Right now, the people that it's helping the most are in countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Nigeria. Why? Because their money is not worth anything. It's hyperinflating. They're using Bitcoin to transact peer-to-peer so they can live. That's not what the cabal wants. This is an exit plan to the fiat system.
So why do you think that all of the cryptocurrencies kind of, when one goes down, they all go down. When one goes up, they all go up. It seems like they're all controlled on the same system.
No, because remember, the system is actually centralized. Right now, we're still in a centralized system. But Bitcoin is still not acting that way. Remember what I told you? You believe because it went from 69 to 25. Oh, it's gone down. What did I tell you when COVID started? 3,800 to 25. Now compare that to every single other asset that's out there. What will you find? Bitcoin is by far the best. It's not even close. If you had bought one Bitcoin at the beginning of COVID, you'd be pretty happy right now. Yeah, you wish it was back at 69, but I can promise you this, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think when Biden gets out of office, Bitcoin will probably be close to 200,000. Just think about where we are now. That's another 20x move, okay, from where we are now. Do you think Mandy could do something with that? You know, move from Calgary down to, let's say, Destin, or let's say Key West, or you think she'd have more flexibility? I think she would. And guess what? Remember what I told you about Bitcoin being about a time machine? She buys that. She doesn't have to work to make that money. Bitcoin's creating time and money for her without her doing anything. All she has to do is make a choice to buy it and hold it. And if you look at the data with Bitcoin, if you hold Bitcoin 3.4 years, it's impossible to lose money. Can't say that about stocks. Can't say that about bonds. Can't say that about real estate, but you can say it about Bitcoin.
Renee was asking if you could maybe list some of those books.
Yeah, probably the first one I would tell people to read is Layered Money by Nick Bhatia. His last name is spelled Bhatia. Another book is Hard Money You Can't Fuck With by Jason Williams. Another good one is The Bitcoin Standard. It's by Safin Amos. That one's a little bit harder to read. My favorite one you can get for free on the internet. It's through Swan Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin-only exchange. It's written by a guy named Jan Pritzker, and it's called Inventing Bitcoin. They usually give the PDF for free if you just go to their website. I think you can find the link and you can get the book. That is like the third grade version of Understanding Bitcoin. It's only like 90 to 100 pages. You can read it in a day or two. And then I would tell people, if you're interested learning a little bit more about Bitcoin, I tend to teach a lot on Bitcoin, both on podcasts, but also there's a Clubhouse app. If you've never heard about Clubhouse, look on your phones, download the app, and then go in the Bitcoin Cafe rooms, and you'll see a pretty eclectic group. They tend to call me a boomer because I'm older, because most of the people that tend to own Bitcoin are probably 35 and down. I got the Bitcoin story early because of me being a black swan mitochondrial. I understood what it meant to be decentralized. All the other coins and the fiat money we're talking about, they're not decentralized. That's the reason you don't want to own them. What does decentralized means? It's not a fixed supply. The supply fluctuates. Anything that has a supply that fluctuates can be debased. So that is not a store of value. You have to have something that's ultimately scarce. And the reason why Bitcoin and nature use time as their scarcity element is because you can't create any more time. That's the reason you want to base your money and your life in and around time. And it turns out the biological system is about light and dark cycles. We discussed a lot of that in the first hour.
So Erica asks, I heard of community trusts. Do you think those are helpful at all?
Yeah, well, they have closed-end funds like GBTC. I'm okay with that if you want to switch your 401k into something like that on a temporary basis. But there's also places in 401k where you can actually buy Bitcoin direct. Like, for example, I think Swan Bitcoin has a service where you can take your 401k money and switch it directly to Bitcoin. They'll help you do that. Unchained Capital does the same thing. There's another one called iTrust that does it. There's fees associated with that. There's pros and cons. But those are probably the three companies that I trust. I've dealt with them, and most of my members, I've pushed them to those companies.
What's your thoughts on Jasara and Nasara? Is that happening, and is that for the people's best interest at all?
Not in my opinion. I think I've laid my case out pretty clear here. What I think you need to do. It has to be 100% decentralized and untouchable. You cannot mess with it. And the same way like I feel about Ethereum or what she had brought up is the exact same way I feel about blue light and about 5G networks or big population centers. Count me out. I'm not interested in giving my time back. I kind of like my life. I like sharing my ideas. I like living in the tropics. I think it's really cool when you can help people change their life. And most of the things that I've told you here today, they're free. You don't have to spend any money on this stuff. You just have to spend some time to learn how nature's built these amazing recipes in you. When you do that and you start living that life, the only thing I ask people to do is share it with somebody else.
Now, when you were talking about, yeah, totally. When you were talking about sleep and how important sleep is that just amount of hours of sleep, or is there optimal times to sleep? Like if you went to sleep at 11 o'clock, would you produce more melatonin throughout the night than if you slept 8 hours during the day?
No, less. You would absolutely do less. But I would tell you, sleep isn't about the time. It's actually about the efficiency. So your thermodynamic efficiency to control autophagy and apoptosis is the key to remaining disease-free. So going to bed at 11 o'clock is always a losing game. Generally, what you want to do, I'm going to give you like the basics of sleep. You want to be up for sunrise. So I tell everybody, make like the Sphinx. Look to the east, watch the sun come up for as long as you can, whether it's 30 seconds or 2 hours. Whatever you can do, you do. Never miss another one. It's the single most important thing you can do for mitochondrial health. While you're doing that, all four extremities grounded. You can hold the tree, put your feet at the edge of the water. I don't care where you are. If you're in Canada and there's snow on the ground, snow is water. Put your feet in that, watch the sun come up. If it's cloudy, that means it's more of a red light day. That's fine. Still do it. Okay? Your brain will then tell time accurately. Trying to think what else you asked me. I forgot
just the time about sleep if you're producing the most melatonin.
Yeah. The other big thing about sleep is that you have to, when the way leptin and melatonin work together is you need to eat while the sun's out. So your last meal of the day, if you're at high latitude, your dinner is going to swing wildly. Like, for example, if it's June 21st, it doesn't get dark till like 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you could eat dinner at 7, 8 o'clock. But when it's December 21st, you probably need to eat dinner at 4 o'clock because the day changes so much. When you're at the equator, the day's always 12 hours, so it doesn't matter. But I tell people, you want to have your last meal while the sun's out. Then you want 4 hours of darkness before melatonin and leptin biology couple. So it's much, much better if you do it that way. What else? Try to avoid all artificial light at night. So that means the cell phone, use color filters on your phone that block blue light, use the Iris software, use Flux. If you have an iPhone, they have the color filters on there that'll do it. Do the same thing on your computer. There's a company called Acme Plastics where you can buy the plastic and put it over your TV to block the blue light. But ultimately, the only light you really want to use at night is probably candles or fire. You need to protect your melatonin stores.
What about for, like people, like I said, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're only getting vitamin D for 4 months. For those other 8 months, we talked a little bit about.
You better make sure in those 4 months. You better make sure in those 4 months that you're naked outside all the time. And for ladies who say I can't get naked, we have bathing suits out now. In fact, I have one on right now because I'm getting ready to leave you guys soon to go in the sun. It's called the Kiniki. They have another one called Cool Tan that's made in the United States. It allows the sun to go right through it. So that's where you can do junk maintenance if you're a guy, and ladies can get their vitamin D both on their perineum and on their boobs without feeling like, you know, they've got to get naked. I'm going to tell you, being naked still is the best thing, but there's ways to do it smart, especially if you're around, you know, a bunch of people.
Now, for I would tell people this is what I thought would, you know, once a week during those 8 months, go to a tanning bed maybe for 10 months. And you're saying it's not full spectrum, but say you did the tanning bed and then went into like an infrared sauna. And if you did that once a week during those 8 months, would that be better?
No, you probably, to get the real benefit, you probably have to do the infrared sauna. Sauna is not powered enough. You need a real infrared A light, a good light. There's a Canadian guy named Chris Cross that has a company called EMR-Tech, TEK. He sells his shit on his website, but also on Amazon. His lights are really good. I've tested them. They're low flicker. You got to get a real big light. I mean, a huge big light. Probably like a 4-footer by 1 foot light. Probably need to use that 3 times, 6 times a day in the winter. 3 times maybe for 20 minutes, 3 times a day in other months. Precondition your skin all the way around. So you want to spin like a rotisserie chicken, get covered, then go in the UV light. But when you go in the UV light, you only want to do 10 or 15 minutes. That's it. And should you do it? Probably 5 times a week. I would tell you, the only people I'd say every day, if you live above the 50th latitude, you probably need to be doing it every day. If you're between 40 and 50, 5 times. If you're between probably 30 and 40, probably 3 times a week. If you're below 30, say you're 28 to 30, I'd probably be okay with 2 to 3 times a week. If you're at 28th latitude, sometimes of the year, like for example, where I was in Destin last year, we didn't have a vitamin D winter. We're able to make vitamin D as long as we don't have a lot of clouds. I'm assuming this year we're going to have a pretty good winter too, because the Gulf of Mexico, the temperature of the water is not really high. We've had a pretty cool August, so I'm not expecting a lot of hurricanes this year, and I think that we should be able to make vitamin D year round. Where you live, obviously, is going to be totally dependent. I mean, to be honest, if Calgary loses their vitamin D power right around August 15th, you're probably already lost it. So if you're going to travel and you're Canadian, you need to start thinking about traveling. Probably all the vitamin D that you made from probably May 15th to now will be gone probably by October. And the way to do that is to check. Most people think that they just go out in the sun, but they're having a shirt on. I mean, I'm looking at your skin compared to my skin. You look white for August. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's been so many mosquitoes here that I've actually had a hoodie on and pants on almost the whole summer because the mosquitoes here have been horrendous, and I think that they're spreading, you know, bioweapons through mosquitoes. So I've been really doing my best to stay away from the mosquito bites.
Well, if you believe that, you just answered your own question. That's the reason why you got to get out of Canada, my friend. There's so many reasons for you not to be in Canada, but this is the number one. Guess what? One thing I can tell you that's never going to improve in Canada is the sun.
Andrew's asking, what was the name of that bathing suit?
The one from the UK is called Kiniki, KINIKI.com. The one in the United States is Cooltan, COOLTAN.com.
Okay, wow. So what's some tips to help with our mitochondria?
Number one, I always like to end podcasts with this: seeing the sunrise every day. If you can see the sun set, that also helps. But I would tell you, always eat a seasonal diet. If you want to learn more about the diet that I advocate, it's in my book. You can find it on Amazon. It's called the Epipaleo RX. It's 100% tied to the electromagnetic barcode of sunlight at the latitude you live at. It's not tied to any man-made ideas. It's tied to nature's decentralized biology.
Renee's asking if you got a Facebook page and how can the Dr. Kruse be followed?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page. It's Dr. Jack Kruse. Instagram, Dr. Jack Kruse. Twitter, Dr. Jack Kruse. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Jack Kruse. LinkedIn, I've got probably 120 articles published for free you can read. Probably the best place is my website has a form. It'll take you 10 years to read everything on my form. You just go to jackkruse.com/forms. Another place that I've got a ton of information is on my old blog. So if you want to learn about leptin biology and all the old stuff I wrote about, those blogs are all for free. But the newest stuff that is all about quantum biology, about the hardcore stuff, the stuff that I like to talk about, go to my Patreon blog. It's www.patreon.com/Dr. Jack Kruse. In there, I think you only have to pay $5 a month, and I promise you, if you read one blog, you'd realize how serious as a heart attack I am. I teach you the science, and I give you sites to back up everything I tell you.
And the name of your book?
It's called the Epi Paleo RX. It's on Amazon. It's got over 400 reviews. Read it. I would call it cuts through probably the first 4 years of my free blog in book format. You could read it. I think it's like 270 pages. I think you could read it in a couple of days.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing this time with us. Last message of hope or inspiration, some way to leave people in a good state of frame of mind here.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you just if you heard anything here that you enjoyed, or you heard anything that's made you curious, do yourself a favor and become an educated person. Don't trust me. Verify what I'm telling you. And then once you verify it, share it, pay it forward. Share it with other people, because you know what? Ultimately, the only way we're going to change centralized paradigms in the world is for all of us to get on the same page and realize that the system, the paradigm that's in power is set up to control us. And I want you to be wilded humans. I do not want you to be zoo animals. That's why I do podcasts like this. And, I really enjoy sharing that. I believe that passion will be my legacy. It will be changing minds of people 20, 30, 40 years ago once I'm dead, once people realize that what I told you was the truth. And I still think that was my purpose of being a doctor. I just thought that I was going to get this information, in my medical training and my residency. And when I started practicing after, 20 years, I was like, a lot of my patients aren't getting better. And that's what started me to ask the hard questions, like, why aren't they getting better? Is everything I've been told the truth? Or am I just a soldier in someone else's war? And that's why now I'm passionate, about teaching people about the stuff that we've just done for the last 2 hours. And I want people to know this.
And are you happy?
I've always been happy. There's no way not to be happy. I think the only thing I'm probably not happy about in life is the status quo. So anything I can do every day to change the status quo makes me very happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this education. Thank you so much for your time that you spent here with us. Thanks for, all you're doing to help and educate humanity. Sounds like, you got a good head on your shoulders, and, you're doing something with it. So appreciate you, Dr. Jack. And maybe in the future we can bring you back on again.
Sounds good. No problem. Enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks. Well, you have a wonderful time in the tropics there. Thanks, everybody, for all your likes, comments, hearts, shares, and stars. We appreciate you all. The missing link is love inspiring new knowledge, and we're trying to do that with every single interview that we have. We have Michael Lee Hill coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's in about 3 hours. About 3 hours. So we'll see you again. Thanks, Dr. Jack. Bye, everyone.